Hamas's terror attacks of October the 7th now took place more than 6 months ago. In that time, just over 100 of the 253 hostages have been released, and according to current Israeli information, Hamas holds, we think, 97 hostages alive, and we think 36 are dead. Again, numbers are uncertain, but around 34,000 Palestinians have been killed, including, we think, almost 10,000 women and around 15,000 children. Record numbers of journalists and aid workers have been killed by Israel, and we've recently seen the first sparks of escalation between Israel and Iran. I'm Charlotte Leslie, the director of CMEC, the Conservative Middle East Council. To gain a better understanding of where we are after this 6 months of horror, I will be speaking to Chatham House Associate Fellow, Professor Yossi Mekelberg. Yossi has been an Associate Fellow of Chatham House for more than 20 years and currently teaches as a guest professor at the University of Roehampton. He was previously Professor of International Relations at Regent's University, where he was head of the International Relations and Social Sciences programme. He had taught at Regent's University since 1996 and before that at King's College London. Yossi is an internationally respected academic and commentator, especially on the Middle East peace process, Israeli politics, international relations theory, and US foreign policy towards the MENA region. Yossi, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Can I start just by asking, 6 months on, where are we with this conflict?
Thank you for having me. There is a stalemate right now. The disaster, the catastrophe that you just described is an ongoing, and though the world is not raging in the way that it did at the early days of the war, people are still killed daily. The humanitarian disaster is getting worse. People are either on the verge of starvation or already there, and there is no thinking about the day after. And my main worry that when there is no plan, there is no exit strategy, what will take hold is inertia. And inertia means that a year from now, 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, there will be still Israeli soldiers, Israeli military in Gaza, semi-occupation, guerrilla warfare, but a peace process and a peace agreement further than ever.
What do you think will be happening to the populations of both Palestine and Israel in this inertia? Are we going to see the increase in radicalisation on both sides as things become more embedded and desperate?
Yes, the way that the war started with the Hamas atrocities, this created huge trauma and shock in Israel that far from being over. You see that, it's Passover right now, and people, whenever you call and try to wish someone happy Passover, they say, we are not in the mood. It's not, leaving a chair empty for the hostages. So no one is in the mood to celebrate anything. This shock and trauma, many have their children still fighting, whether in the north, we sometimes forget that the hostilities going on in the north with the Hezbollah in Lebanon or in Gaza. The hostages are still there, and we don't know exactly their fate. But the same goes for the Palestinians. After 34,000 people dead, probably 60-70% of the houses damaged or destroyed, no medical help, no food. This is a huge trauma. The only what you see is that radicalization of both sides. They're apart more than for a very, very long time. And this will require real leadership to bring together some rational thinking. Because what's the alternative? To continue with this kind of war and radicalization and thinking that the only solution is through force, which you see doesn't resolve anything, or almost reboot the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, go to the basic tenets of the conflict and try to resolve them. The one thing, those are society in huge crisis. They were in huge crisis before October 7, even worse crisis right now. It needs the support of the international community to see sense.
Let's talk about leadership. First, in Israel, we have a government that is, to say the least, controversial, with some, to say the least, controversial cabinet members in that government. Can you tell me a bit about how the domestic Israeli political landscape is feeling, and also whether Netanyahu has actually achieved anything through the bloodshed of the last 6 months.
You know better than me that in politics, reading too much into public opinion polls is very, very dangerous. But because they are consistent now for 6 months, that most of the Israeli public wants to see Netanyahu out, what Israel needs is election. But this is not going to resolve everything because, again, the Israeli society is fragmented. You know, after the terrible 6 months that everyone has experienced, then there were 5 elections in as many years in Israel, and only for tactical voting. There is some sort of stable government, but it's supported by the most extreme far-right messianic religious elements. And they want to push even further, go into Rafah. They press Netanyahu to bomb Iran. Those are elements that in the past were completely marginalized in Israeli politics. Now they are in the heart of Israeli politics. So elections needed. Israel set itself in many ways to fail in this war because it's set as an objective to destroy Hamas. And it's set to weaken its military capabilities. It's one thing. But Hamas is a political movement. It's an ideology. And political ideas, with ideology, you can fight only with better ideas. It's not, unless you think that by definition the people in Gaza are extremists and supporters of Hamas, which there is no evidence of that, then you need to offer them alternative. And right now, what's the alternative? The destruction of Gaza. This is not going to make many friends. So you need new thinking. One of the things that completely distort Israeli politics is Netanyahu himself and his corruption trial. Because it's very difficult to know, and your guess is as good as mine, whether his decisions are influenced or mainly dictated by Israel's national interest, or what is good for Netanyahu when it comes to stay in power and to stay potentially out of jail. And for him to stay in power and stay potentially out of jail, he really needs to stay in power, and for that, hopefully to prolong the war. Because everyone expects that by the end of the war, there'll be an inquiry, a state commission to inquire the huge failures of October 7, the intelligence, the perception, why so hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars were saved to Hamas and the rest, what was behind it. And Netanyahu was supporting this. And an election. And there is an expectation that those who, like Benny Gantz and Eisenkot, that they join the government as the responsible adults. They demand election by September. Then Netanyahu relies even more on the far right, the Ben-Gvirs and the Smotrich of this world. And this stalemate in Israeli politics, it's not good for the country, but it's dangerous in terms of its strategy toward Gaza and regional stability too.
I'm Charlotte Leslie, Director of CMEC, and I'm speaking to Yossi Mekelberg, Chatham House Associate Fellow. Talking about leadership and Hamas and alternative ideologies, what about the PA, the Palestinian Authority? And is there more that Netanyahu could have done to foster a secular, nationalist Palestinian leadership as opposed to Hamas?
There is plenty of spilled milk there that we can shed tears over there, but the question, what do we do with that? Absolutely, the reason that he supported the transfer of so much money to the hands of the Hamas is to perpetuate the split between Hamas and Fatah and delay the establishment of a Palestinian state probably forever. That was the idea. Divisions among the Palestinians serves Israel in the sense of sidelining two-state solution, which we see the results. But it could have done, should have done, but now we're in the situation that we are. And the Palestinians need fresh election. Now, people talk about unity. I don't think it should be a unity government, that there should be unity of the political system. Then what Palestinians decide in a free election, who they vote for, who is going to lead them, this is for the Palestinians. And as any other political entity, it should be a majority, it should be a minority, there's coalition and an opposition, it's all fine. But then it should find how unite Gaza and the West Bank and the PA representing, and the PLO representing everyone. The big question will be what to do with Hamas. And Hamas is not going away. But how do you manage to change Hamas in a way, whether it's possible at all, to be a legitimate political force? For now, this is an extremely difficult question.
What effect do you think the upcoming American elections are going to have on the dynamic?
It depends who wins the election. You know, if Donald Trump wins the election, it enters, again, unpredictability, and probably even more unpredictability than his first term. And he still holds a grudge against Netanyahu for recognizing the election of 2020. And we know what happens when Donald Trump holds a grudge. President Biden, you know, he proved from an Israeli point of view of a friend of Israel, but not a critical enough friend of Israel. And it's interesting because at the very beginning of the war, he probably warned Israel in the right way. He said, we support you. We sent a carrier to the Eastern Mediterranean. We'll help you with ammunition and weapons, diplomatically, politically. But remember, democracies fight differently, not as terrorist organization, and learn from our mistake at 9/11. And look what happened. Israel didn't listen to this, or maybe listened and ignored, and the United States didn't make Israel listen, or at least face the consequences of not listening, for the sake of the Palestinians, but also for the sake of Israel itself. This ended in Israel in front of the ICJ, which is not a great achievement, and being isolated to the extent that some countries that are regarded as friends want to impose, including here in the UK, a ban on selling arms. So this is the position that we are. President Biden instinctively supports Israel. But at the same time, something it eclipses his judgment on what the United States should do. So what we see, on the one hand, many times the administration says the right things, but doesn't behave accordingly. And I assume if Joe Biden wins the election, this probably would continue.
One of the issues that's always raised when the West is accused of giving Israel a free rein where other states may not is the issue of illegal settlements. What's happening with illegal settlements and the settlement movement at the moment? And would you say that our inability to provide consequences for that illegal movement is now kind of coming home to roost?
No country should get free rein in anything, because we see the consequences. There was a sense, for instance, after October 7, that there was a free rein for Israel. At least Israel understood all the support, the visits by all leaders, Western leaders coming and support, as a free rein to do whatever it likes in Gaza, and we see the consequences. The settlements is by now nearly already a 50 years long issue that's been ignored. We need to say time and again, the settlements in the West Bank, the Jewish settlement in the West Bank, are illegal. Internationally are illegal. Politically, they are counterproductive. If anyone believes in a two-state solution, not just as a mantra, when we don't know what to do, let's say, okay, let's have two-state solution. It has to be a viable, but it should be a viable Palestinian state. But right now, there are 700,000 Israeli settlers in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank, scattered all around the West Bank. This makes a viable Palestinian state very difficult to achieve. So what are we talking about? Of evacuating some of, for instance, 100,000 settlers, because many of the settlers are either in East Jerusalem or close to the border. Is this possible? Are we talking about a different two-state solution within a one-state reality? But the message from the international community, and I think in this sense it's the United States that is blocking it more than anyone else. Settlements are illegal. There are some settlements that, even according to Israel, are illegal. Those are the outposts where most of the settler violence come from there. And I think we should stop using the term settler violence. This is terrorism, because they terrorize burning houses, burning cars, damaging property, killing people. This is terrorism. This is not just violence. Of course, it's violent. And it's done with impunity. It's done many times with the support of the IDF in the very strange way, the bizarre way that it operates there. The IDF escorts the settler to commit this kind of act of violence. So instead of defending the victims of it, it protects the perpetrators of this. And this where it's done with not only impunity within Israel, also internationally. And this should change only towards the very end of the Obama administration. The United States didn't veto a resolution that condemned basically the expansion of settlement. There must be way beyond that, must be repercussion when it comes to settlements.
I'm Charlotte Leslie, Director of CMEC, and I'm speaking to Yossi Mekelberg, Chatham House Associate Fellow. Why do you think there is such a blind spot for Israel when it comes to upholding and providing consequences for breach of international rule of law?
I think Israel is a confusing country. I think confusing for Israelis too, but definitely for the outside community. On the one hand, it's a democracy. And those who visit Israel in many places see a liberal democracy. And until the more recent attack on the judiciary, highly respected judiciary with a Supreme Court and a High Court of Justice, it's all the symbols of a democratic state that the West wants to support, wants to kind of almost set as an example. Then a thriving economy with the high-tech, with the agriculture and pharmaceutical. Also a beautiful country to go and visit. Some parts of it is real liberals, if you go to the areas of Tel Aviv. So in this sense, it's impressive. And no one should take away from all the successes. But then there is the other side, the dark side of Israel, which is the settlements, is the occupation. And the same Supreme Court that all of us want so much to defend is the same Supreme Court that allows violation of human rights 5 minutes away on the other side of the Green Line. And this is confusing for everyone. But I think good friends sometimes should tell some home truth to friends and say to them, we can respect you, even admire a lot of your achievements, but this is not right. And occupying millions of people and keep others as refugees and basically stealing land by building settlements, created separate roads and separate services, which is the definition of apartheid. This is unacceptable. The security of Israel, we are committed, as we just saw in the case of Iran. The UK and France and Jordan, other countries, and of course the US, came to the defense of Israel. But this behavior is unacceptable. But sadly, including here in the UK, for many years, the UK has been more interested in bilateral relations, look at more than £5 billion worth of trade, intelligence cooperation, and decided not to look at the dark side. And I think we see the results of it.
So in a sense, transactional relationship has, in this particular case with Israel, trumped a values-led relationship with standards and values. Is that what you're saying?
Completely. We see that, for instance, 800 civil servants from across the West, including in the UK, signed recently a letter, said that if we continue to support the way Israel behaves, we become complicit potentially in violation of international humanitarian law. In order to say, even potentially, and then again, I don't like the popular use of genocide is for the ICJ to decide. There is a legal definition. There is a polemic way to use genocide, and we see it way too much. But at the end of the day, the ICJ, by the idea that whatever is happening right now in Gaza, and also to a large extent in the West Bank, by these countries support Israel militarily and politically, become involved in, see the discontent among many civil servants, the expert in the field, by not only supporting it, facilitating for it.
I'm going to ask a very sensitive question and apologise in advance if any listeners find this upsetting. To what extent, if any, do you think that collective guilt in Europe over what was allowed to happen in the Holocaust has any bearing at all on the trauma that many Jewish people feel, because in their families persecution, those diabolical stuff, isn't very far away generationally, and of the leadership in Europe who are adamant that it will be never again? Is that still a factor, or is that something that gets put into the debate erroneously?
You're right. It's a sensitive question. But and it's, as all other sensitive question, because it's an important question, needs to be dealt with. I think more in the past than now, because there is a generation that didn't experience. I think if, for instance, you talk of someone like President Biden, belong to kind of the older generation, immediately after the Holocaust, for them it's a very strong sense of A, commitment, B, also guilt. But I think what I sense, at least, there are two contradictory sense of guilt, if I can put it like this. One is the sense of, there is responsibility for the Jewish people and support them and the idea of Jewish. But also there is a sense of guilt, a post-colonial one, towards those who are deprived of self-determination. And I think the only resolving the two aspects of this guilt, the Holocaust one and the post-colonial one, is actually achieving a two-state solution. So those who think that Israel came at the expense of the Palestinians, and those who thought we didn't do enough for the Jews, I think actually two-state solution will ensure long-term the safety of Jewish people in Israel, but at the same time won't deprive Palestinians what they entitled is self-determination.
The arguments about a perceived double standards of the West in dealing, for example, with Russia, Ukraine and Israel-Gaza are well rehearsed for anyone who has conversations, in the Middle East and around the region. What responsibility, however, do you think the Arab world bears for allowing this situation to reach the pitch it has? And what role do you think the Arab world can play in the resolution of this horror?
That's what shouldn't be any double standards in any walk of life, let alone in international relations. And some of the arguments of double standards coming from the West or other parts of the world is correct. We deal differently. For whatever reason, there are biases and prejudices, sometimes even racism that enter into the conversation, and it's wrong. It shouldn't be the case. I think the difference that we should between Ukraine and the case of Israel is the way that the war started. Because Ukraine didn't commit any crime against Russia to begin with. Though some will argue that the occupation and the way that Israel treats is what triggered October 7. But if we isolate it, which some might argue it's not the right way to do that, it's the way that this current war started with Hamas atrocity. So it created the right of Israel to respond. What it didn't is the right to respond the way Israel responded. By the way, for the sake of both sides, I think Israel will pay for a long time the price for the day. Not having a strategy, not going only after Hamas or the perpetrators of October 7, but basically going after the population of Hamas. Now, to your question about, I think there is a rethink in the Arab world how to deal with it. Sidelining the Palestinian issue doesn't serve anyone. I honestly still think we need to go back to the Saudi initiative. It looks like ancient history, but it was maybe 2002 in a world that moves very fast. Sounds like ancient history, but it's not. The idea that normalization would follow an agreement between the Israel-Palestinians always been the right way to move forward. I think Israel missed an opportunity there. I know it was during the second intifada. It was not easy. Ariel Sharon was the prime minister, which also complicated the ability of Israel to respond positively. But I think along the way, there were opportunities to revive, the Beirut Declaration that followed the Saudi initiative, peace initiative. And I think if everyone learn now from this experience, I think there is expectation always that peace will be brokered by the West. I think should be a Middle Eastern side to this, because this will be the best guarantee, because it's a Middle East interest more than a Western interest, and if they work together, and acknowledging that first and foremost it's in Israel and Palestinian interest, I think we stand a better chance. But this is part of learning from the last 6 months. Really draw the lessons that we need to draw.
I'm Charlotte Leslie, Director of CMEC, and I'm speaking to Yossi Mekelberg, Chatham House Associate Fellow. Do you think the Abraham Accords will be seen in time to come as a contributory factor to peace or to discord?
Well, we see the results right now. Now, you can't blame the Abraham Accord of October 7. You see, at the time when I was asked about that, I said, of course I support normalization as such. We would like to all countries to live in peace with one another, and whenever there is conflict to normalize, but there is an elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room was the Palestinian issue. And there were two options. Either that Israel, as a result of the Abraham Accord, and already peace with Egypt and Jordan, feels secure enough and confident enough to stop believing that everyone wants them out of the region and destroy Israel. And in this kind of newly found confidence, will sign an agreement, be generous in agreement with the Palestinians, which I didn't think would be the case. Or we'll do exactly the opposite. What's the rush? Our situation is better and better. Everyone wants to be our friends, and they recognize how great is our technology, and everyone wants to stop Iran. We can completely put aside the Palestinian. And considering that it was Netanyahu at the time, but even with the Bennett government, which is a very short time, sadly, that's the conclusion. This was the conclusion in Israel. The idea there is no partner for peace on the Palestinian side, which the answer to that, if you don't see partner, ensure that there is one, because you can help creating a partner. And the other conclusion that first and foremost, you can have peace with everyone in the region. If you don't have it, with the people that you can see from your window, you will never have security.
We've mentioned those who may want to wipe Israel off the map. So let's talk about Iran and the recent risk of escalation. Where do you think we're going with that? If you could just recount for our listeners the recent events and where you think we're headed.
I think the most recent one is the Israeli airstrike in Damascus, in what is probably part of the diplomatic mission, Iranian mission in Damascus, and that killed several senior Revolutionary Guard in Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Iran immediately said that it's going to respond. Now, this is not the first time that Israel actually, allegedly, according to sources, killed senior scientists or senior Revolutionary Guard officers or generals. So you question when Iran said that it would respond and respond in kind, whether it's because it was kind of the last straw for Iran, because there is pressure from within Iran to respond, or they feel they lose deterrence, or they also sense weakness in Israel. When Israel is more and more isolated, deep in the quagmire of Gaza, there is an opportunity here to hurt Israel. And it responded. It looks a bit like theater, and everyone behaved according to the script. But we have to look at the other side. When a country launches 350 drones and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, it can go, even if you want them to be mainly intercepted, it can go badly wrong. And it didn't, in the sense that 99% were intercepted. Sadly, one young girl was badly hurt. Israeli base was damaged to an extent, but it allowed enough room for Israel to respond in a measured way. And again, not even taking explicit responsibility for that. So for now, people will ask, was this kind of last round of hostility between Israel and Iran ended in a draw or advantage Iran, advantage Israel? But it creates enough space for them not to escalate it. But the basic tenets of the competition between them still there. And they almost need each other as enemies, as long as it doesn't get out of hand. Because I think both sides know what it means to have a direct confrontation between the two. One of the reasons that the United States and the others intervened on behalf of Israel is knowing, hey, there is a commitment for the safety and security of Israel, but what might be the consequences if Israel is hit hard by Iran? So that's trying to avert this catastrophe.
Coming back finally to the UK, we are looking to a general election at some point in the coming months, who knows? And there are many members of parliament, parliamentarians who are concentrating on domestic issues here at home, but for whom events in the Middle East and Israel is resonating with their constituents and with them themselves, and a desire to protect the state of Israel. What would your message be to parliamentarians, ministers, anyone listening, on what the UK can do to both protect the state of Israel and bring about peace in the region? What should the approach be?
Yeah, I think in British politics we are in very precarious. We don't, the biggest state secret is when going to be election. It's going to be July, it's going to be October, or something like this. In basketball terms, it's called garbage time. We know the results, but, we still need to play until it's, the game is over. But we have to also take into account that possibly there will be a lot of new parliamentarians comes there with probably very little experience in international affairs, more dealing with constituency issues, but less with international affairs. There will be more probably Labour parliamentarian, which also mean shift in attitudes towards Israel. The message, if the UK's other countries want to be good friends of Israel, which we should encourage, they should be also good friends of the Palestinians. It's not either or. It's not a football match. It's not either you support this or the other. It's supporting the values that the UK stands for, of human rights, of decency, of justice, and moving back to a two-state solution, but in a way that adjusts to the conditions as we see on the ground. But not only look at the technicalities, but look also at the values, 21st century values of what does it mean to be a citizen, or in the case of Palestinians, not to be citizens of a country, and rectify it. So there are a lot of good reasons for the UK to maintain its close relations with Israel, but at the same time to be honest and bold with Israel that certain behaviors are unacceptable, be honest with the Palestinians as well, and clarify to both sides. Don't harbor maximalist objectives. The only way forward is probably a painful compromise for both of you, but it's way less painful than what we encounter right now.
I'm Charlotte Leslie, and I've been speaking to Yossi Mekelberg, Associate Fellow at Chatham House. Yossi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Charlotte.